Next we have a turn to philosophy. Matthew Riddle is going to talk to us about illusionism.
Hi you guys. Right, so I suppose in the interests of full disclosure, I'm not an illusionist, but I'm trying to understand it as best as I can, and I'm trying to take it as seriously as possible. Okay. So I'm also going to try and get you a little bit excited and interested in what's going on here. So what is illusionism? Illusionism is a philosophy of mind. How do we explain minds? Well, one answer is the mind is what the brain does. That's something that Steve Novella on one of the previous QEDs mentioned. And he sort of gets a little bit into illusionism. So how do we explain brains? Well, brains are explained by evolution, biology, chemistry, and physics. And so what we're left with is the question, is there anything mysterious left over? No, says illusionism. Our brains have evolved for fitness and not to intuit truth. That's quite an important point. We'll be returning to it. So the sense that we have that there's something mysterious left over, which a lot of people really do have, so I think it's something that we really do have to take seriously, that's the illusion. So the challenge to illusionism sort of breaks down into a couple of different categories, but it really starts with David Sharma's hard problem of consciousness. So what is the hard problem of consciousness? How the brain works, they're the easy problems of consciousness, right? So all of your neurons and the networks and the way that they produce behaviour, we could sort of study it, and with enough neuroscience and research, we could sort of get our heads around it, you know. And with all of that, we've sort of explained it. So the hard problem is why it feels like something to be us. That's the hard problem of consciousness. How do we explain this subjective experience of seeing something red, or the taste of coffee, or the taste of chocolate? Those things that for a lot of people don't seem to reduce down into the numbers that we need to plug into our equations to model reality. So the outcomes of that challenge, essentially, broadly speaking, and there might be a little bit that's missed out here, but most of the time it boils down to panpsychism or idealism. So in panpsychism, the way that we resolve this problem is that we've got the building blocks of physics have some sort of rudimentary experience. And I recall David Chalmers saying it's not like an electron is buzzing around having existential angst as to what's going to be going on, but there's some really small element of experience that is associated with that fundamental particle or electron or whatever. So in panpsychism, what we need to do then, if we've got everything at the bottom having some sort of experience, is a way of combining them so that we can then explain human consciousness. So panpsychism incurs what's known as the combination problem, which is no small problem. Okay, so idealism is another way of doing this. Instead of the bottom-up approach, we've got a top-down approach. Reality as a whole has experiences. It's quite a big claim, but quite an interesting one. These experiences can include dissociative ones, like yours now. So the idea here is, and this feels like a funny thing to say at a Skepticamp conference, but the idea here is sort of like your reality and sort of the experience of being a human being is sort of a dissociative experience within that big mix of everything that's going on. And the idealism incurs the problem that on some level, it's telling us that we're God. So this is where we come round to sort of a model of physicalism that I'm trying to understand so that I've got an idea of what's going on. Let's have a look at this. So we've got causes, behaviours and states. We've got time. And this is sort of the picture that I understand from talking to a lot of people and philosophers and scientists. More philosophers than scientists, but the idea that essentially we've got an unknown force which moves particles or fields, which is a prescriptive element of reality. We've got the behaviour, which we'd call the laws of physics, the description of what's going on. We've got state, which is the fundamentals we build everything else from. And then we've got epiphenomenal chemistry, epiphenomenal biology, epiphenomenal mind. So this is the view that I'm questioning. This is the view that I don't quite buy into, but I'm really interested in steel manning it. So I'm going to suggest what I think must be going on now. Ooh, let's have a look. So for me, I'm sort of struck by this problem that I really appreciate. If anyone here can help me out in resolving it, I'd be very grateful. I'll be around, perhaps not so much this evening, but definitely over the QED weekend. Please do feel free to say hi and ask questions. Right, so exactly what have I done here that's different? So, what we've got now is we've got two causes. There's the unknown force, which moves particles or fields, which is sort of prescriptive, just as we did before, same as before, but this time round, we've got an experiencer of experience, because it sort of occurs to me that I experience, therefore I am, and I tell you about that, therefore I do. So I think we're genuinely causing things to happen in the world, and I think that's really quite a conundrum. And it sort of challenges our way in which we see physics, unless some physicists can put us straight on it. So what we're essentially saying here is much the same as before, but experiences are generated from these fundamental particles or fields. Those experiences come to us, and then we do something with them. We affect reality in some manner. So I think this is true, but I'm very open to being challenged on it and understanding how I might be wrong. So what is illusionism? Coming back to the first slide. Illusionism is a philosophy of mind, and we sort of need it because if we don't try and be scientifically conservative about this, we end up saying crazy things like I do, right? So the mind is what the brain does, and brains are explained by evolution, biology, chemistry, and physics. Is there anything mysterious left over? Well, you know, at the end of the day, I think that's really for each and every one of us to answer for ourselves, but what an interesting question. Illusionism, though, is this sense that what most people have, that there is something mysterious left over, it is an illusion. It's some sort of mistake. And I just hope that going through all of this, while I'm not going to sort of fully explain it, because it's quite a big topic, that the 8 or so minutes that we've had so far will give you a little bit of a taster and maybe get you interested in exploring this further. Right.
Well, thank you very much. I think the first question is from Lardon. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go with Lardon. What's the problem with classifying consciousness as an emergent property of physics and biochemistry that doesn't equate to it not existing or it being an illusion?
Well, I think the problem is that I don't see how these sort of emergent things can actually cause things to happen. Because I think that probably one of the easiest ways of sort of framing it would be if you're entirely composed by your atoms. Okay. Right? I know that's oversimplifying it a bit, but if you're entirely composed by your atoms and you have no say what any of those atoms do, how can you be causal?
Fair enough. And the next question is from Steph, who asks, what's your view on determinism? Whether free will, choice and everything exist?
Right, that's a good question. I think...
Easy one.
Well, there is actually a categorically easy way to answer this, and I think I'll lean into that. There's obviously physical determinism is clearly going on. You know, if any of us sort of walk off a cliff, we're going to fall, right? So things are definitely physically determined, but I also think things are experientially determined as well in some fashion. So it's both those things at play. One of the things that I sometimes get asked with the free will question is sort of, we could imagine it a bit like, well, if we went back in time and we played reality through again, would you do the same things? Maybe you would. Does it matter? If you're actually determining things, then you're part of that.
Right. And we have a question from a physicist next. This was bound to happen.
Brilliant.
And he asks, how does the experiencer impact the fundamental laws of physics, as implied in your diagram?
That's a great question. You don't necessarily need to think of it as breaking them, but adding something else. How does it do that? Well, I don't know that. What I would suggest, though, is if we're causing things to happen, that has to be the way that we lay the problem out. And that's something I'd really like to talk about this weekend, with everyone, really.
And we have Igor, of course, has to ask a question. We'd be remiss if we didn't ask a question by Igor, obviously. And for this one, he says, do we really need an additional entity to explain phenomenal consciousness? Should we just cut it out with Occam's razor and move on?
Well, I'm really attached to the idea that I cause things to happen. And that's a real problem. And if it's a problem that we want to take seriously, and I think it's a fun problem, right? I think that, there's a lot of talk that people have, this idea that people have, that the mind-body problem is something that philosophers have sort of thought about for thousands of years. We're not making any progress, and there's no point in you bothering. No, don't feel that way about it. It's a serious problem that you can get your teeth into. It's sort of where I'd go. Sorry, I've lost track of the question a bit there.
Can't we just get rid of the whole concept?
Well, I am attached to causing things to happen. I think that if we are all causing things to happen and we just sort of brush that under the carpet, I think we've made a mistake. There we go. That's the answer.
And let's see. Colm. Sorry, I'm having fun here. Does consciousness have only to do with higher order beings, or could worms experience subjective consciousness? I mean, sorry about the visual imagery.
No, that's rather great that that's come up. It would seem perfectly reasonable that you could have a real hierarchy of consciousness. And, a lot of this sort of thinking comes about by us really trying to engage with the problem and then say, oh, okay. I mean, your blood cells, your liver, what has consciousness and what doesn't. And if we want to be careful here, we can definitely acknowledge that we all have consciousness and dogs and cats have consciousness, but how far does it go? That's an open question. It's a very interesting one too.
I think we've got time for... Igor has... and it's a really simple one. Of course. Moral luck? Yes or no?
Moral luck? Oh, gosh. I don't really know the answer to this question. Not really. I don't want to overstep the knowledge that I have or sort of say, know something when I don't. I don't really know. Not really.
That's an answer everyone goes for. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Yeah. Thank you again, Matthew.